Terrain! We made it to a version with an actual terrain generator. Welcome to episode 2 of Minecraft Through the Ages, where we just started a world in pre-classic RD160052, the first version with an actual terrain generator. The basic way that terrain will be generated all throughout the future versions of Minecraft, and in many other games, is using what's called noise. There are all different kinds of noise generators, and in Minecraft's case we use Perlin noise. The Perlin noise generator generates what's called a noise map. Noise maps look a little something like this. We use this map by assigning each location on the map a number from 0 to 1. This is represented by the color. But at this point, we only have a set of numbers throughout a flat plane, so we use these numbers to determine height. This is what a noise map looks like when converted to a height map. Noise can also be generated at any frequency, and the height map I've just shown only shows one frequency. So let's take a look at what effect frequency has on this map. We can use this slider to visualize what frequency does to height. To make this map more interesting, we also use multiple different noise maps, usually with different frequencies, to diversify the terrain generated. We can see in Minecraft that throughout the game's progression, the terrain generators are super different based on the time period. And this explanation of noise maps is super basic, but it gives us a pretty good jumping off point of what the game is working with. In this world specifically, the noise manifests itself into these super cool looking cliffs and otherwise boring flat plains. This version comes with a lot more than just terrain though, as we have 3 more blocks. RD160052 adds wood, a new texture for stone, as what is previously the stone texture is now being used for cobblestone, the aforementioned cobblestone, dirt, and using the dirt texture, a new grass texture. We can skip past the cobble, dirt, and stone texture, as their texture stays effectively the same up until the 1.14 texture update, but the wood texture is super interesting to me. The texture has a reddish tinge that doesn't even last for one update, which is super strange. Keep an eye on the wood texture throughout the pre-classic and early classic versions, as it has a surprising amount of variation for the fact that diamonds or stone haven't changed since their inception. During all this terrain and texture talk, I've been building this lovely house, and in the background you may have noticed 2 things. First off, and most annoyingly, is the way that grass works in pre-classic all the way through the latest version of classic. If grass is obstructed from the sun, it just simply ceases to exist. The same thing happens to any soon-to-be added plants, and it is a little bit very annoying. Of all the things I've had to deal with in playing these early versions, this quirk is easily one of my least favorites. And whilst I build this tower, I'll talk about the second. There is a rendering glitch in this version that is running rampant. The wiki attributes this error to being likely due to game tick corruption, but whatever the reason may be, it happens very often and is super annoying. After I built this house and tower using the new blocks, I also decided to build a small castle that would eventually house the first and only pre-classic block museum. A fun fact about Minecraft at the time was that the name of the game was still being decided on at this point, believe it or not. We started our naming journey on the first two versions, with it simply being labeled as Cave Game unofficially. Then, between that version and the one we are playing right now, there is a lost version that gives it its first official name, Minecraft Order of the Stone, which I think is pretty neat. This update, the name changes to its final form. As of now, we are officially playing Minecraft, even though all the versions are still labeled as RD. Another thing this update adds are the block breaking particles. This is the kind of addition where you don't ever really think about it, but having it is just so nice. Alongside this are some other small changes, such as a decreased amount of human mobs that spawn on generation or loading of a world. It's lowered to 10, but that is certainly offset by the fact that the game now has B bound to spawning human mobs. I decided I should try and push this mechanic to its limits, and, well, you can see how that turned out. Well, with all that out of the way, we are on to version RD 161348. Plants! This update added the first ever plant to Minecraft. RD 161348 changes the wood planks texture to be a little less saturated, changes around the block preview in the top right corner of the screen, and adds a fifth block to work with. The saplings added in this version are not using their original texture, however, as the sapling texture for this version is actually being pulled from the classic version 0.0.13a texture.png file. I suppose now would be as good a time as any to mention that yeah, in these original versions all textures were stored on a single texture map, which you can see here. These are all the terrain.png files for the last three versions that we've just played. Anyways, the original texture for this version, and the texture that we will have for every version after this until 0.013a actually looks like this. And as you can see, this texture is like downright ugly. Even Notch thought so. When selecting blocks in these pre-classic versions, use the numbers on your keyboard. Notch thought that the texture for the saplings were so ugly that he actually ended up skipping 5 and hid the saplings on the 6th key. Saplings are also notable as they are the first dynamic block in the game. As stated before, the same as dirt, the saplings die and disappear when not exposed to light, but they do the same thing when not placed on grass or dirt as well. The way that they die in these versions is using a primitive sort of decay, and it happens to them if they're floating as well. Finally, since this version is before any sort of tooltips, it turns out that the actual name intended by Notch at this time was shrubs. Turns out the use of this block as a sapling actually comes retroactively once they added trees into the game. With the new saplings in mind, I decided to build a little greenhouse and path out back. Making these fake trees was a bit of a struggle considering we don't have anything even close to leaves, so I decided to bite the bullet and just use stone. And I think they turned out pretty cool. Keeping in mind that the world is going to be updating into newer and newer versions, I decided to also dig a huge 15 by 15 hole straight to the void. Thinking about all the new opportunities with terrain, I decided to build a little cave, seeing as there aren't any yet. I also put a little mineshaft looking structure inside the cave to try and, tie it all together. Well, there it is all laid out. With these past 2 episodes and the last 2 worlds, we have officially been through all the found pre-classic versions. I think that this has been a really interesting experience playing these super bare-bones versions of Minecraft. It really does feel like the first development phase of the game, and for lasting less than a week, it's certainly added a lot. Starting around May 10 or 11th and ending on May 16th, 2009, I've played these versions longer than most anyone, and I'll say I've really enjoyed it. But with that all said, I'm super excited to get started on the classic versions of the game. This is where things really start picking up steam. On to Classic!